Welcome to Talk South Asian to Me. My name is Michelle.
And my name is Anusha. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central and hear us react to each other's stories about mental health and growing up in different South Asian households.
And remember, this podcast is not therapy. Engage with what feels entertaining and resonates with you, and leave what doesn't. All right, you ready for our topic reveal?
I'm ready.
Yes,
Little drum
our
roll.
letter is G. Can you believe it? We're already at G. This is so exciting. So our topic is gaslighting. Dun, dun, dun.
Mm-hmm. Dun, dun, dun. Very, very important one in our communities.
Very important. And I feel like recently too, it's been like a buzzword too. I've been hearing a lot of people say it more and more and acknowledging it. Or I feel like at one point before I was fully knowledgeable about it, it was still at one point when it was pretty abstract for me. I was probably misusing the word, and so I think it's important for us to use this opportunity to learn what it is and define it, but then also relate it to different South Asian households.
Yeah,
so
I love
wanted
that you said that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, like I'm sure. Have you felt like that it's been a buzzword recently?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of like therapeutic buzzwords like we used people pleasing already, gaslighting.
Yes.
They're big ones. And I definitely agree. I think that sometimes when we hear a lot of these, buzzwords come up and in the pop culture and whatnot, I think that sometimes it's like the telephone game, right? Sometimes the actual meaning can get misconstrued. So I love that you're like, let's just define it first. I love that. Let's define it.
And I think it's important to define this term because not only, like you said, it's a buzzword and it could be, misconstructed in social media and different ways that we've been exposed to it. But I think it's also just to set that foundation, right? Like before we even apply it, let's define it. Let's make sure we're on the same page before we discuss it. So I was able to find some literal definitions. The literal definition from the dictionary is gaslighting means to manipulate someone using psychological methods into questioning their own sanity or powers. Those lots of heavy words.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to point out kind of like the origin of the word. So according to psychologytoday.com, it also like gave a similar definition. I'll go into it too. But the origin of the word is it comes from, I was reading a little bit of both, like a 1938 play called Gaslight. And then there was like a film adaptation to it in 1944. And basically just a quick synopsis of this play / movie or film is that there was a husband that was making subtle changes in the household. He lived with his wife, whereas like dimming the light, maybe you've heard about this or not, but he would like dim the lights, like, just do subtle changes without really telling his wife. And then when she would question it or like talk about it or discuss it or bring it up, he would like completely deny it and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And it was like lying and kind of just not acknowledging those changes. And then it led to the wife kind of questioning her own thoughts, questioning her own sanity, questioning her own feelings, her own self-worth. Like it was a spiral. So that's kind of like the origin of this word.
I've heard that recently, but before then, like I had no idea.
Me neither.
I know this is just like a summary, but like, why? Why did he do that?
Yeah, I know. I feel like I need to watch this movie now. We should watch it together.
I kind of want to watch it
and just like break it down and be like, what is going on?
What is the motivation here? What is going on?
Yes. And I do want to point out like gaslighting like can occur in personal or professional relationships. So when I was researching gaslighting, like I saw different examples and different scenarios that were not only happening in personal relationships, but also in the professional setting. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. Psychologytoday.com, like the author that wrote this article also kind of went into more detail about how it affects the victims. And so they said, quote, victims of gaslighting are deliberately and systematically fed false information that leads them to question what they know to be true often about themselves, they may end up doubting their own memory, their perception, and even their sanity. And then it
Right.
goes on to how there could be long term effects, right? Leading to questioning of their self worth, leading to anxiety, leading to depression and other issues. And kind of, if it, and could become a cycle too, like it could be passed on, the act
Mm-hmm.
of gaslighting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the
Wow.
definition that I kind of was able to kind of put together. Do you feel like I missed anything in the definition? Would you like to add
No,
anything?
I don't think so. That feels like a very good you two different definitions, but really the same
Mm-hmm.
exact thing, which is,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you know you're being gaslit, right? It's again like that feeling of knowing in your gut something to be true, but like hearing someone say, "Nope, that's not true. That didn't happen." Just like complete denial as one of the
Mm-hmm.
manipulation tactics, and then really just feeling like you're going crazy. Like, how can that be? Like, I know it to be true. I feel it. I remember it. That's
Yeah.
kind of how I see gaslighting, but I never knew the exact definition. So, like, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when I was reading about this, the overarching theme was to gain control. Like the reason why people do
Yeah.
gaslighting,
Hmm.
consciously or subconsciously, is that they
Oh,
want to
yeah.
gain control over that victim, the person. And it was interesting. Like lots of these definitions included the words like insidious, and dangerous
Mm.
psychological control, because it is,
Yeah.
right. Like it's
Yeah.
very abstract and it's kind of tricking the victim's minds, which can be hard to come out of. Like if that's what
Hmm.
your mind is like you're tricking the mind, and the
Yeah.
mind can be hard to change sometimes or
Hmm.
have a new realization.
Absolutely. And there's with anything that we talk about, there's like a spectrum of this. There's definitely people out there with very nefarious, intent who will use
Mm-hmm.
gaslighting as really just on purpose, trying to manipulate, trying to control, trying to gain something for their own gain
Mm-hmm.
on one end of the spectrum, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, like you said, sometimes even if you're not aware, like you're consciously doing this, people will do this,
Yeah,
and it's not for any nefarious reason. It's not for any conscious struggle for that control.
exactly.
But the underlying thing is, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of control aspect to this, whether that is, well, I'll save that. I'll talk about it in the story when we talk about it. But
Ooh, I'm
that
excited to
underlying
hear.
control thing is, it can be unintentional. Still sucks,
Exactly.
still not
Yeah.
okay, but it can be unintentional, not meant to be harmful,
Yeah,
but the damage will be done.
for sure. And I want to point out too, like gaslighting is not exclusive to just the South Asian culture. Like
Right.
there's happens every, and doesn't matter. I feel like in different communities, different groups, gaslighting is
Yeah.
present historically too. Thinking about the historical events that we've learned about growing up,
Yeah.
it's filled with gaslighting and gaslighting
Mm.
events. And so just wanted to kind of point that out too, was that it's not exclusive
Yeah.
to our demographic,
Yeah.
but don't want to take away the heaviness of this issue and the
Mm.
toxicity of this issue, and that just because it does occur doesn't mean it's right and it should occur.
Right. Right. And for the purpose of our podcast, because it is meant for a very specific community, we'll just talk about one
Yeah,
aspect of the gaslighting in this
exactly.
population.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
now we kind of defined gaslighting, and now kind of I read up a little bit about how gaslighting can occur in South Asian
Mm.
families. What are some examples? And there was one article. This writer's name is Melissa Khan, and the title of this article is When Gaslighting Seeps into Parenting. And
Oh.
so this Khan kind of talks about the driving force for gaslighting that can occur in the South Asian family, or specifically South Bengali households, which was the concept of what will people say, log kya kenge, right? Like that's the driving force of
Yeah.
gaslighting, like not
Mm.
acknowledging the person's beliefs, desires, their child's desires, beliefs, wants, and just
Hmm.
focusing only on what were other people saying and undermining that child's
Mm-hmm.
feelings and
Yeah.
thoughts. And then this writer also goes into talking about how it might start out as an intention to protect their child, right? Subconsciously, consciously, we talked about it. But I
Yeah.
thought this was really interesting. This writer wrote that they do these things and sometimes they can lead them to never acknowledging their own mistakes and never apologizing for them because they think
Right.
that they can do no wrong, which
Right.
again can lead to questioning like, okay, then if they're not wrong, then I must be wrong. One person has to be wrong because we're
Right.
disagreeing. So that
Mm.
again snowballs into questioning self-worth and own feelings and and those do not matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And another, yeah, it was a really, really well written article. And I was like, wow, like this is so true. Like
Mm.
it's putting this abstract concept concretely for us. And I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Another article I read, they talked about like the phrases that parents can use, like, we've done so much for you, or
Mm-hmm.
when you have kids, then you will understand, or like, when I'm
Oh my
gone,
goodness.
then you will
Yeah.
understand, right? Like those
Yeah.
phrases too can again undermine what we were saying in that moment or what we were feeling, what we were thinking, and completely
Yeah.
victimizing themselves and being like, no, no, you're the issue, not
Right.
me.
Right.
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
And this article I read was it was so beautifully written and talked about how when you make these realizations about your parents or whatever personal or professional relationships that you're making these realizations about gaslighting
Mm-hmm.
and becoming aware of it, like say it's a close loved one, like a parent that you're understanding, like, oh, they were gaslighting me or I was gaslit at that age, then
Mm-hmm.
it's like important to have grace for yourself and kind of think like, okay, like I can feel sad and angry about that
Yeah.
situation at that person, but I can also have love. Like those two things can coexist. It doesn't have to be exclusive.
Mm.
And I really like
Yeah.
that they said that, because when we hear the word gaslighting, when we hear about situations, it can
Yeah.
be really dark, and it can
Yeah.
create a place of darkness or create thoughts of darkness for that person that
Mm.
you were gaslit by. But it
Yeah.
doesn't have to undermine, and it doesn't have to be exclusive to the fact that they are a loved one.
Right. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that that sometimes can be such a struggle, right? Initially recognizing that you're being gaslit and then having a name for it, knowing it's happening, seeing people not, take accountability for those moments. It can really create a lot of resentment. It can create a lot of
Hmm.
anger, a lot of, emotions can come up with that, sadness, grief,
Yeah.
etc. And I
Yeah.
think that I think that there is a space in which
Hmm.
if we allow ourselves to really, heal and like recognize and hold space for all of those
Hmm.
things, that there's definitely a world in which we can come to exactly what you're saying, holding that duality of, I'm still kind of angry that that happened. It was not okay. But I
Hmm.
also understand that it wasn't nefarious, and I do love my parents, or I love my friends, I love my coworkers, whoever is doing this, and kind of finding that middle ground between both of those,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
feelings of, I can still love this person, I can still have this person in my life, and I can also recognize that they're kind of prone to this, and I don't think they realize
Hmm.
it. Maybe they're not going to change. And that leads you to kind of figuring out what kind of a role they play in your life, what kind of boundaries you
Hmm.
might need so that
Exactly.
you can still have them in your life. But
Hmm.
sometimes that journey is hard, and some people
It
don't really
is.
find that. Some people don't find that duality, and some people choose to
Hmm.
distance themselves, and that's always, it's sad, but sometimes that's needed too, especially if
Yeah.
there's no change, and it's hard to really enforce those boundaries, and it hurts you
Hmm.
more.
Yeah. Another like last tidbit of
Hmm.
kind of research I wanted to shed light on, and just like to tap into this. I feel like this could be its own podcast episode.
Uh-huh.
But have you ever heard the term medical gaslighting?
I think so. Is that referring to like gaslighting in the medical industry, and like maybe like certain
Yes.
populations, and how
Yeah. So
they'll
when
be
I was
like, yeah.
no, no, keep going. What were you saying?
No, explain it.
No, I was saying when I was researching gaslighting in South Asian households, South Asian families, South Asians, like medical gaslighting came up.
Hmm.
And I was reading like
Ah.
articles written by South Asian women about their
Mm.
experience in healthcare and how years went by, and because of, they didn't have that a physician or a provider that understood the culture, understood the
Mm.
implications, and kind of dismissed different culture practices and didn't
Yeah.
really like for like a serious issue. And they went years without having a diagnosis, and then years later they found out that they had certain condition, and they were
Uh-huh.
gaslit by their providers to think
Right.
that nothing is wrong when there
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've maybe you've done a little bit of reading, maybe you know about this, but I think I've heard that certain populations, particularly like women, and then the one that's more, researched, I don't know about like South Asian population, but the one that's more researched is that like Black women and like Latinx women, they experience a lot of that, especially like
Mm-hmm.
here in US, and a lot of
Yeah,
this medical gaslighting of, the medical
it's real.
community.
I think
Yeah.
it's real for
It's sad.
women of color, people of color, BIPOC community. Like, I think it's important
Yeah.
to shed light on that. So I feel like, again, right, that could be its own topic of its own
Yeah.
podcast, but it's important to consider, like, right, like, again, professional
Yeah.
settings and personal settings or
Oh
personal
yeah.
relationships, gaslighting can occur. So that was a
Anywhere.
little bit
Mm.
of background on
Hmm.
gaslighting. Do you feel like you have anything to add? Do you feel like I missed anything that you might have
Mm.
come across?
I think the only things that, like I've heard of or like other sayings, like even like when I do work with gaslighting and things like that, we do often talk about like the component of like control, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's intentional or unintentional, figuring that out. And then from there,
Mm-hmm.
you know, being able to like process some of those feelings that come up with recognizing that, which again will be
Mm-hmm.
different whether you recognize it's like intentional manipulation or unintentional.
Yeah,
And then from there, kind of deciding, do I want to have this person in my life? To what capacity will they
mm-hmm.
have space in my life?
Exactly. How do I want to set boundaries?
Yeah. And I have some other, like, I think common phrases that I've often heard people say when they feel gaslit, especially in South Asian communities. But I'll share that when I
Mm-hmm.
share my story.
Yeah. So going into a little bit of, I have like a few tidbits, small kind
Okay.
of tidbits from growing up.
Uh
And
huh.
a big one that kind of stands out, I want to get like kind of share a little bit about it was, so I'm in a household of two, right? I have a little sister. I'm really close. And, I've supported her through her journey with college and things like that. And when it was time for her to go to college, she got, accepted to a very prestigious school that kind of required her to leave home and move across the country.
Mm.
And right, going back to that control,
Yeah.
like, of course, my parents weren't really thrilled about that. They were, of course, really proud of her and very,
Yeah.
very supportive with her achievement and being like, her accomplishment and being accepted to such a prestigious
Hmm.
opportunity in school. But they weren't really having it when it came to like
Yeah.
moving away. And I think that's partially to like,
Mm.
her going through a lot of healthcare issues and then wanting control over that too and not really wanting to
Sure.
let go. So she did ultimately make the decision to move across the country and do school there. And of course, it
Mm.
wasn't a smooth road. It was bumpy for everyone. But it was a learning experience. And so I felt like throughout that time that my sister was in school and living from far from home, anything that would go wrong, whether it be health wise or like just like something that would cause my mom worry, she would
Mm.
immediately kind of put it on me. Like, you were the one
Oh.
who told her to go and move. So, like, not even like
Ah.
having a discussion, but like kind of almost victimizing, saying, you're the one who moved her away from me. You're the one who told her
Mm.
to move. You're the one who, like, this is all you. Like, if you wouldn't have let her go, like, this wouldn't have happened. Or this issue
Yeah.
wouldn't happen. Like, she wouldn't be like all of that. And it was like
Mm.
to the point where it was so repeated. And it was like she was in a way kind of manipulating my perception of the conversation that I had with my sister, which was not me
Mm.
telling her, hey, you need to do this. You need to move to New York. You need to go. Like, I wasn't telling her that.
Yeah.
My exact words were, you're your own person. I want you to go after what you want and what your dreams are, and whatever you decide, I will
Mm.
support you. Right. But when this continuous blame and this continuous conversation and acting, right, like it wasn't even a question, like, you're the one who told her to go. You're the one who made this
Mm.
happen. You're the one.
Yeah.
This is like, it was like, at a point I was like questioning, like, did I tell her to go? Right? Like, did I,
Yeah.
am I at blame for all these issues that are happening? And it was hard. And I
Mm.
remember like talking to my therapist about this issue because it was repeated at one point when I was visiting home. And it was like really getting to me because I was like,
Yeah.
it's not my fault.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not responsible for all of it. Like,
Yeah.
that's a huge burden. And I remember like what you said, right? Do I have a conversation? Do I set boundaries? Do I kind of share how I feel? And, I did go with the route of using the I statements and saying like,
Mm.
I felt blamed, or I gave my mom like a concrete example, like, you're making me feel, or I felt, not, sorry, not you. I said, I felt like when you said
Yeah.
this, I felt
Yeah.
that I was the one who kind of chained my sister's hands and dragged her to New
Mm.
York, right? That's what I felt. But I didn't, like, that's not what I did. Like, that's what our conversation is making me feel. And
Yeah.
I think like sitting down and having that conversation and being direct and using those I statements and telling her how I feel, like, I think that really helped her in showing her that I do have self-worth and I do have my own feelings.
Mm.
When it wasn't that case, when I wasn't able to have these conversations, it was just like, she's right. And like,
Mhm.
whatever she thinks is right. But no, like, no,
Yeah.
you're not always right. And this is why, because this is not what happened. And like,
Yeah.
when I was looking at the definitions of gaslighting, like, that was one of the things, right? Like, self-worth, you're questioning your self-worth.
Yeah.
And on psychologytoday.com, it talks about, when you read the article more, it talks about how to get out of it. And like, one of the suggestions was like, when you stop being hooked on that, the person who's gaslighting, the gaslighter, when you stop being
Mhm.
attached or hooked at their ideas and kind of let go and create your own ideas, communicate your own feelings, kind
Mhm.
of disagree and like be kind of stern on it and be like, I feel this way, you know,
Yeah.
that's kind of helps you break away from that cycle of gaslighting. And I think that's what happened with this. And again, right, it's not perfect. Still occasionally comes up,
Yeah.
but it was monumental for me because it created this own space for self-worth that it was not surrounded and clouded by this gaslighting experience.
Mhm. Yeah, because you challenged it. You confronted it.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was hard because like I've grown up listening to my parents say those words too, right? Like every time mental health issues and topics come up, it's very dismissive, you know, you don't know, I know everything, or,
Mm.
you know,
We know what's best for you.
right, we
Yeah.
know what's best for you.
Mm.
Or like even if a disagreement happened or things did get heated, like it's not
Mm.
acknowledged, it's just like acts of service happen, like my dad cutting me fruit and just holding the plate in front of me and not saying a word. And that's his way of like apologizing or acknowledging what happened, which is not true.
Mm.
Like, you do not acknowledge what happened. You do not acknowledge my feelings. You do not acknowledge that. But like the biggest thing I think that I still am struggling with is that whenever I share a concern with my dad or something, like, on the phone, like, I'm feeling this way, or I'm worried about this, or immediately, no matter what it is, don't worry
Mm.
about it. Nothing will happen. Like, it's just completely like dismissing kind
Mm.
of how I'm
Yeah.
feeling. Like, like in Urdu, like, don't fikr nikar, like, don't worry about it. And I'm like,
Mm.
I'm not worrying about it. I'm just telling you how I feel, right? Like, it's completely
Right.
dismissing the conversation we were having. And I
Yeah.
just, it was not, it was not, it's not fun. I'm just get frustrated.
Yeah,
So
it's invalidating.
yeah. Um, but
Mm.
I will say using the I statements, especially with my mom a lot, has helped her like start
Mm.
being more upfront and start talking about things and apologizing for
Yeah.
making mistakes and for, not acknowledging my feelings. Like it has been a little bit fruitful, but still a journey.
That's an amazing win still, that
Mm-hmm.
she is, willing to take responsibility, willing to
Mm-hmm.
listen, recognize when she's, maybe like not effectively communicating, when she's maybe hurting
Mm-hmm.
you, and like,
Yeah.
recognizing, apologizing for it, and doing something
Mm-hmm.
about it. I mean, those are three very different things, right? One, being able to recognize and listen. Two, being able to even say like, I'm sorry, I didn't know I was doing that, and I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to do something differently. And then three, like, doing something differently, right? I mean, those are all
Yeah.
three very specific actions that don't, often get done.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's amazing. And you led that. You led that.
Thanks.
You were brave enough, as hard as it is, to say, okay, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right. Let me try and have a
Mhm.
conversation. And you didn't know how that was going to go. I'm
Exactly.
glad it went well, but you didn't know.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's hard.
it
Especially like the
is.
mental health piece, like when the mentality of like I know the best and I'm older, I know better than you and that's it. Period.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because again, we've grown up differently now with our like than our parents
Yeah.
being immigrants. And so
Mm-hmm.
like lots of ideas clash with my parents and when it comes to mental health, which was a taboo for their culture and them growing up at home. And now I'm completely challenging that taboo in their life and it's making
Yeah.
them uncomfortable, but it's
Yeah.
making them like it's almost as if they have a hard time even accepting that it's existing reality.
Yeah.
Like mental health is real and that's so
Yeah.
hard. And like I feel like gaslighting is the root of that. Like some family, like parents don't even know that they're gaslighting because they don't know that's a thing because they don't agree
Yeah.
that mental health is a thing.
Right. Well,
Hmm.
that's the thing, though, right? I mean, gaslighting is so woven into the fabric of South Asian parenting, so
Hmm.
woven into the cultural practices and
Hmm.
beliefs that it's almost inseparable at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, the things that you said, right? Earlier you said like lo kyaking. It's woven right there. That is, a form of gaslighting. The
Hmm.
belief of that, saying that,
Yeah.
the we know what's best for you, you owe us, we've done so much for you. All of those things are things that I'm sure we've heard at least once in our life, and if not more. And those are all
Yeah.
woven deeply within that idea of gaslighting is kind of a part of the way that parenting is done in South Asian,
For sure.
households. Yeah.
Yeah. That's my story.
Mm. Well, thank you for sharing
Yes,
and
of
thinking
course.
about it. That's always a hard
Yeah,
thing to do,
it
especially
is.
like, gaslighting. That's such a big journey. And like sometimes when
Mm-hmm.
we're going through that journey, we can build up a lot of resentment. We can build up a lot of
Mm-hmm.
anger. So it sounds like you've
Mm-hmm.
been doing that work and you're finding,
Thanks.
that middle ground of how can I recognize that this wasn't okay, isn't okay, and still love and hold space for my
Mm-hmm.
parents.
Yes, for
It's a hard
sure.
journey to do. I'm proud
It
of you.
is. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I have a similar kind of story, particularly with, dad and the fruit bowl. I think that that's definitely a story that's gone pretty viral, like on TikTok and,
Yeah.
Instagram reels and everything, because it's true. Like, this is how South Asian dads apparently show their love. They cut you a
Yeah.
fruit bowl and say, here you go,
Yes.
as an
Oh, it doesn't say
acknowledgement.
anything. Just feed you.
Yeah, just like put it there, feed you, give you something, or like eat
Yes.
this, whatever it is. And it's their form of, I imagine, an apology, an acknowledgement of, okay, I know we fought, or I know words were said, but I care about you, I love you, eat your fruits, be
Mm-hmm.
healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a sweet gesture, of course,
For sure.
but sometimes it doesn't feel enough, and sometimes it doesn't feel validating still to not call it out, to not take responsibility, to not
Yeah.
validate and say, oh man, I did that. That was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I'm so sorry that I
Mm-hmm.
did. Sometimes those words can carry way, way more weight than a bowl of fruit.
Yes, for sure.
But I suppose in some way, misguided,
Mm-hmm.
the thought that counts as sweet too.
Exactly.
And that was definitely my dad. I mean, my dad has definitely, when he believes in something and thinks something, like, he is stubborn. He digs his heels into the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and this is his belief.
Mm-hmm.
Period. You cannot shake him.
Yeah.
And like, I think I shared with you a couple of our podcast episodes back about how I recently had a conversation with my dad about how over the summer one time, and they were having me like on a diet regimen, like their
Mm-hmm.
beliefs on eating, and I was discussing that with him recently, and he was like, that wasn't wrong. You did lose weight. Those
Oh
were healthy
no.
foods. I did nothing wrong. You didn't
Ooh,
you gained your weight
gaslighting.
back only because you went back to eating the way you wanted and not the way we told you to. Full
Mm-mm.
on gaslighting of, you made this mistake and like you're remembering it wrong. This was actually a good time for you. This was actually a good experience for you. This was actually good for your health. When I know that was not good for my health.
Yeah.
Nutritionists, fitness experts will tell you that was not good for anyone's health. But no,
Yeah.
dad was like, but it works. My method works. And he like just dug his heels in and he was like, there was nothing
Wow.
wrong. I was doing great. In fact, I should be a coach. And I was like, okay,
Oh no.
we're done with this conversation now.
No. Ugh,
I know. And,
I'm sorry. I know like you
yeah,
probably went into that intention of like having a conversation, turn it into a
yeah,
gaslighting kind of strike.
yeah, exactly. Going into that conversation, I wasn't really charged. That's something with my own like therapeutic journey, come to accept and understand. But when I had that conversation, I was trying to go in for curiosity and understanding and like learning that these are the things I kind of expected of like, oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's what nutritionists like actually say? But
Mm-hmm.
what was surprising, and I guess in some ways not surprising, was the refusal to take accountability. And
Yes.
even if it's like a possibility of like, oh, was that actually bad for you? Oh, that's weird. Why did it work? Like it wasn't curious. It wasn't, learning oriented. It was perhaps defensiveness of,
Yeah.
nah, everything was fine. I was great, in
Mm-hmm.
fact, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not great. It was difficult because I could feel myself, even though I'd worked through this in particular, this incident too, I could feel myself kind of getting heated and like those kind of wounds and emotions kind of like rising again. And I had to remind myself, like, okay, my job, my responsibility is not to make dad understand. My job, my responsibility is not to
Exactly.
make dad listen, hear me. I don't need his apology because I know that was wrong. But I also know that my dad cares for me a lot. He loves me a lot and he shows it in his own ways. He's not willing and able to show it to me in this way. That's his limitation. And I can either take it or leave it. And I
Yeah.
take it. Yeah.
That's
So
hard.
it is
Sorry.
hard. That's okay. I've come to accept that in my journey of this. And it can be hard in those moments still, but overall, it's like a commitment, right? It's a commitment to, continue choosing the way that we will interact with people who do
Exactly.
these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like with mom, like even she used to do this a little bit, when I was kind of growing up and everything. But a couple of years ago, I kind of did what you did and I kind of like sat my mom down and we had a good conversation. Essentially, like, I think I was, most of our conversations when I teach mom something end up with me in tears. But as I was like tearfully explaining to her, like, that's not true. Like, you did do this. And even if you don't
Mm-hmm.
believe it, so what? I remember it. I feel it. I know it. And like that, I think that combination of like me digging my heels into this and like me like bawling my
Nice.
eyes out, I think it really shook her. And she was just like, oh, like, is it possible that I did that? Because she feels it so strongly. And I think
Wow.
that, that was a case of like, again, very unintentionally doing something and then denying it, maybe because she felt like
Defensive.
guilt or shame or
Mm,
defensiveness. Her like instinct was to be like, no, that didn't happen, or I didn't say it like that, or I didn't mean it like that. But my reaction made her like really pause and take a step back and be like, hmm, okay, well, I don't
that's a
remember that,
huge
but
stride.
yeah, but she did say like, but I am sorry that that made you feel that way, and I'm sorry like if I said it like that, that it came across like that. Here's what I was trying to say, and like we had a whole conversation about that. And
Wow.
I think now, like you said, it's never like, it's not perfection,
Mm-hmm.
but progress. And like there's still moments when she even like does some gaslighting or like make some comments or things like that. But when you call her out on it, like, she's more often than not more willing to like take
Wow.
accountability and
That's amazing.
progress
How
over
like
perfection.
yeah, exactly. Progress over perfection, but like also like taking that in, like giving you're empowering your mom to like feel safe enough to pause and reflect on probably cycles and cycles of gaslighting that
Mm,
she probably maybe experienced, right? Like, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like you're letting her, you're giving her the opportunity and supporting her in that way to change her outlook. And even
Mm,
that 1 second of like curiosity, like, oh, did that happen? Like, even if it was
mm,
unintentionally, that's huge. That's like, instead of like, no, 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 that can't
mm,
happen. Like my daughter, like I would never make my daughter feel like that. Like that
yeah.
mentality. Like my daughter loves
Yeah.
me. Like my daughter would never feel like that for me. I'm a great mother. Like I'm never gonna make my mom feel like that. Like how
Mm.
amazing.
Well, I gotta say, it's not always like that.
Yeah, that's
On
fair.
our good days, we're humans. We also make mistakes, right? But on our good
It's fair.
days, I feel like I can hold that space and be more calm and
Yes.
explain. But when it's a little bit more
Yeah.
personal, it's a little bit more triggering. I gotta say, I probably don't.
Can
I
go
know
the
I
other
don't.
way.
I don't hold that
Yeah.
space. Yeah, I can quickly engage too. And again, progress over perfection for myself. I'm working on it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. It's
um,
hard.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, I think that for me though, growing up and even now, like a big piece of this, the definition, right? It's like making you question your own like memory. I
Mm-hmm.
already have sometimes a great memory, but most of the time not so great of a memory. So I'm like really prone to this. And, even for example, like I've experienced this in my job where I will be told something is safe for me to do, safe for me to try, which
Mm-hmm.
was, I'll give you an example. Um, my supervisor once had told me, like, I was a supervisor, my initial one had told me, like, it was perfectly okay if I was going to move and if I was going to go look
Mm-hmm.
for another job and if I was going to go find another supervisor, she'd be okay with it. She encouraged it. She wanted the best for me. And then I did that by happenstance. And she didn't quite like it. She made it about herself and she says, I never said that. If you had a problem with me, you should have told me. Like, why are you leaving?
Mm-hmm.
What have I not done? And she made it about herself. But like,
Mm.
she kind of gaslit me into taking a pause and being like, wait, did she actually tell me she'd be cool with it or was she not okay with it? When I know that she did say it was okay. She did encourage
Yeah,
me and
yeah.
support me until it was
That's
real and then she felt threatened.
That's a really good professional example. That's really hard. Like you built trust with your supervisor and then they come around and
Yeah.
they just kind of flip the
Yeah.
script on you. Like she did that. That was not
Exactly.
okay.
Mhm.
Like you shouldn't have to fear that rejection and
Yeah.
that that not giving support with what you're wanting to do when you thought you had
Yeah.
that support.
Exactly. But the funny thing is like I wasn't even like considering it. It was her who put that thought into my mind of like, hey,
Yeah.
it's totally okay if you need to find a different supervisor.
Yeah.
Sometimes not everyone's a good fit until it became real and then she I guess felt threatened in
Mm-mm.
that moment or like something was going on and she just kind of took back her words and didn't react well, which is unfortunate because ideally, as another therapist, she would have been able to separate that.
Exactly.
Um, but, again, even like this professional example and like personal examples that we've talked about so far today, they really do highlight this idea of sometimes gaslighting can come across in the intention of the person as this is how I show my care for you, this is how I show my love for
Mm-hmm.
you. But inherently, controlling someone, it's not love, it's not
It's not
care.
love.
And we can misguidedly think so, but the consequences of it are going to be invalidation, are going to be resentment, are going to be
Mm-hmm.
shame, guilt, low self esteem, like we talked about, all the things that are the opposite of love and care. And I think
100%.
that even though up until now, gaslighting has just become such a fabric of the way that, the culture and the parenting exists, I think that I hope that this generation and onwards will attempt to bridge that difference. And
Yeah,
if not, at least do better for the next generation.
exactly. And like you said, like gaslighting tactics can be disguised with love and care, but
Mhm.
really the undermining and the motive is control.
Yeah.
And it can be a harsh
Unintentional or
reality
intentional still.
reality. Yeah, unintentional, intentional, but it could be a harsh reality to accept and be like, oh, like
Yeah.
this love and care that I thought they had for me was conditional. And it has to do with
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just thinking a little bit deeper, and of course, not discrediting like South Asian
Mhm.
parents that have gaslit their children, right? Like our experiences and
Mhm.
things. Not to like
Yeah.
discredit our experiences, but just like thinking a little deeper in the why behind it, right? Like I'm like maybe being gaslit themselves, like my parents, or even like again leaving everything behind, sacrificing everything, not having anything in their control but their own kids. And
Yeah.
so holding that tight grip of wanting that control and
Absolutely.
then acting in as a gaslighter to keep that control could be
Yeah.
another survivor technique, like tactic. Like that's how you're
Absolutely.
surviving. That's how you're coping.
Yeah. That's very insightful, and I think that you're probably really spot on with that, because especially for those who are unintentionally being manipulative, I think that often
Mm-hmm.
that is what ends up happening. Is either one, that's what they know because they've experienced it, so they pass it
Mm-hmm.
down, or two, because again, right, it's like you care so much about a person and you love them, and you recognize you cannot control this person. They have their own mind, they
Mm-hmm.
have their own opinions, but you feel scared or whatever, and you don't know how to regulate yourself, you don't know how to communicate it more effectively, then you're going
Yeah,
to lean on the tool that you do know, which might be
exactly.
manipulation. And
Which
if you're going
is,
to do it that way with
mm-hmm.
even best of intentions, it's not going to come across that way though.
Mm-mm. And it could be like moving into a new place, not having control, not understanding what the surroundings are like, learning the way of life, as
Yeah.
adapting to the lifestyle here compared to what they grew up in. It could cause that fear, cause that anxiety,
Yeah.
and then like maybe feeling like they have to sacrifice their own cultural practices in some way, and then kind of
Mm.
imposing that on their children in whatever way it is, right? Gaslighting could be in that form as well, like wanting to be their child a certain way when it comes to religion and culture and those
Right.
practices. And so
Yeah.
it's almost as a way to kind of preserve their identity through their children. And
Mm-hmm.
that could be
Good
related
point.
to the gaslighting too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Sad,
when you,
but
yeah, it's sad. And you know what, the example that you gave about your mom and your like dad's conversation is just like, it's just so interesting how our experience is similar too. Like, I feel like my
mm,
mom has made a little bit more growth than my dad. And I
mm,
feel like my dad's kind of still, like what you said, like has dug his heels in the ground. Like,
yeah.
me and my sister have attempted to have conversations with their dad, like, same way we've done with our mom, like
Mm,
I statements, like, my like act like love languages was like a big thing for us, like way we wanted to receive love and the way our dad was giving love was in aligning, and so we had that
mm,
conversation, and then of course he made it about himself, started getting tearful.
mm,
I've done so much for you, I've sacrificed so much for you, and we
yeah.
don't really see him cry, so like when we saw that we like instantly started feeling guilty of like sharing our own
Mm,
feelings and started
yeah.
undermining our own thoughts and feelings and feeling
Yeah.
that shame, like, oh, we made our bad dad
Mm,
feel that way. And again, like
mm,
maybe unintentional gaslighting there too, but it's there, right? Like
yeah. Yeah.
victimizing themselves. It's
It's
so
a
real.
wonderful example of that. Yeah.
It's so real. But it's so interesting to me. I
Gosh.
wonder if that's a shared experience with other South Asians like us in our
Mm,
society, where maybe one parent can be a little bit more open to these discussions versus another. Is it one or
yeah.
the other? Is it more of, if we had the privilege of having both parents in our household, like which one is it? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a very interesting topic. And that's also a really good
Mm-hmm.
example, like you said, of how you went in with the best of intentions with what worked maybe with mom and tried it with dad, but
Mm-mm.
dad wasn't quite at that same level as mom was with willingness and ability to like
Exactly.
receive and recognize and like
Mm-hmm.
hold space for maybe like it's clear it sounds like he was feeling some defensiveness, he was feeling
Mm-hmm.
some maybe guilt, maybe some shame, even that he was quick to like, nope, but I'm doing things though, I don't need to be feeling
Mm-hmm.
this, that's not me. And
Yeah.
but
I wonder if it
and
has to,
then you felt bad because you shared
yeah,
feelings and you saw your
felt
dad cry.
guilty.
That's a big thing. Dads,
Yeah.
in my experience, don't often cry. When they cry, it's a
Yeah,
big deal. It's scary.
it is. It is.
Yeah.
And like it's just like it could go back to that ideology too. Like I feel like culturally there's like the expectation where like the head of the household is a father figures. They all have
Yeah,
to
very patriarchal.
not show emotions and kind
Yeah.
of stay strong all the time, to not cry. Amount of
Yeah.
times we've heard like an
Mm.
old elderly saying, "Oh, you're a boy, you're not supposed to cry." You know,
Or have any emotions.
yeah. So it's like I wonder if that has to do with that too. Like it's all bubbled up. So when you're challenged for that, but like other people challenge you, you immediately start gaslighting because that's all you know, and
Yeah.
you don't know how to acknowledge your own feelings or acknowledge
Yeah.
others' feelings because that was never modeled and taught.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't know how to regulate, you don't know how to confront those things, all you can do then is control that narrative that you have in your mind, because
Mm-hmm.
that's a safe bubble. That keeps you safe from
Exactly.
these icky emotions that you don't know and never learned, never were taught how to regulate, how to understand.
Yeah.
And I think that oftentimes because historically, men in India, most people, but particularly men in India and, South Asian countries never really gotten the opportunity to feel their feelings. They
Mm-hmm.
never got the opportunity to recognize even what are the feelings I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't even know exactly how to name the feelings they're having, right? It's not something we inherently
Exactly.
know. It's something we need to
Yeah.
learn. So if they weren't
Yeah.
even able to hold that space, they don't know how to identify them, they don't know how to deal with them, all they can do is hold on to the idea of control,
Because
sometimes
that's
through
all they know.
manipulation. And that's
Mm-hmm.
so sad, but it's reality sometimes. And that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So, for us, having like as the children of parents like that, the responsibility unfortunately falls to us to figure out how do we want to have a relationship with this person in a way
Mm-hmm.
that is going to keep resentment at bay. And
Mm-hmm.
that could be a hard journey to have to figure
Mm-hmm.
out that answer.
And I think it always all starts with having those conversations that you've had with your parents, right? Like I've attempted. It starts from something small like that, and even
Yeah.
smallest wins should be celebrated
Yeah,
and should
definitely.
be taken of note.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. That's a
Well, heavy
good
topic,
talk.
big topic, but I am curious, for our listeners, if anybody else has heard any other stories or phrases that have made them feel gaslit and would like to share, all ears, feel free to share
Yeah,
that. Even if they're similar ones, we'd love to know how many of you have
yeah,
experienced similar things.
yeah. Or like if you've noticed that one caregiver in your household or another or
Yeah.
elder in your household is more open to us challenging those notions.
Yeah. All right. Ready to sign off?
Yes.
Okay, well, then a reminder to our listeners, if our podcast has resonated with you and you'd like to share your story with us or answer any of those questions we just threw at you, you can reach out to us at our Gmail, talksouthaasian2me@gmail.com, or you can find us on any and all the socials at the handle at talksouthaasian2me.
Yes, we would love to hear from you. We're excited.
All
This is a heavy
righty.
topic, but
I know.
definitely want to acknowledge it and want to hear from anyone who else has anything to share with us.
Yeah.
All
All
right.
righty. We'll see you again at next podcast, which is H.
Woohoo. All right. Have a good
Bye.
night. Bye.